All right, welcome back to another episode of Unspoken Truth. I'm the founder of Mutual Respect and the host, Daniel. And today, by powerful demand, welcoming back Michael Hose, a man whose first appearance on Unspoken Truth sent shockwaves across social media. Michael didn't just speak the truth, he exposed it in his explosive first interview. He laid bare the real agenda behind our family courts, the institutional rot, and the silent war being waged against fathers, families, and the truth itself. Michael's words struck a nerve because they were grounded in lived experience, professional legal insight, and fearless conviction. And since that episode, the silence from the powers that be has been deafening because they know the truth he spoke can't be unheard. Today he returns not to repeat himself, but to go deeper, to unpack what's really at stake, what's changed, and what we the people can do if we are serious about reclaiming our families, our rights, and our country. Michael, it's an absolute pleasure to have you back on Unspoken Truth, mate. Let's pick up where we left off because the people are very keen on hearing what you have to say, sir.
Fantastic. Thank you for that opening. Thank you for the invite. And just for the record, Daniel, it's Michael Joes.
Joe, I've always got that wrong, mate. I went with Jose. That was wrong. So it's Joe.
I
apologise, mate.
I've had that all my life, of course.
Yep.
I was actually one of the very few people who thought about marrying out of my name.
All right, we'll jump straight into it, mate. Your recent Facebook comments made it clear that you're fed up with the political corruption that's destroying our country and our children's futures. When every agency from police, child protection to the courts is protecting itself, where do families turn for justice in today's society?
All right. So firstly, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's strictly corruption, political corruption, that is. Obviously, having travelled the world, there are countries that have far higher levels of what we'd actually call corruption. Because the problem is the system we have in Australia is currently operating within a legal framework. I've talked about that previously, and I'll touch briefly on that again today. But even though it's operating within a legal framework, I do believe that it is nevertheless wrong. It's unjust, it's unethical, and as I've stated previously, I think it's breaching human rights. And it's not strictly, as I've said before, so I don't think the family court is operating as a justice or judicial entity because it doesn't adhere to basic principles of evidence. It doesn't adhere to basic principles of natural justice, doesn't adhere to human rights. I think it's more accurately described as a government body that's enforcing policy, and that policy is very poor and very impactful. But it is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Some people have put figures around it. I think it's in the terms of many, many billions per year, and that yields significant power. The domestic violence industry under the last national plan alone had $3 billion over 10 years. So there's a lot of people involved in this that are not going to give up their institution, their income, their power, their career, their jobs, their influence without a significant fight. And we're pretty much foreseeing that. So the Family Law Act has been in place since 1975. Every single change that really has occurred to it, despite having potentially positive intentions, has steadily made the jurisdiction worse. And referring to the most recent reforms of Labor in 2023, where they substantially changed the Family Law Act in non-compliance with the Senate inquiry that was convened in 2019. Those amendments and reforms in 2023 substantially increased the costs for the litigants because it threw out 25 years worth of case law that now has to be reset. So that's families paying to map out the law again, and also abolished the presumption of shared parental responsibility. So if fathers even want to get to an even playing field, they've got to litigate just to get a chance to have an opportunity to be in the lives of their kids from a decision-making perspective. Previously, that was assumed. Now they've got to fight just to get to that. And as I and others predicted, as a result of these terrible changes in 2023, we rolled on to having record levels of fatal domestic violence in Australia in 2024. I think there's an absolute unambiguous link to that terrible record set in 2024 and terrible government policy, terrible legislative reform. As I stated, the 2019 Senate inquiry recommendations were completely ignored. We've been machinating on solutions for the jurisdiction for decades. There's some really good books that have recently been published, including Stapleton's, which outline exactly the machinations of the family court over 40 years. it just keeps getting worse and worse.
Yeah, no, I agree, mate. So
Yeah.
just to elaborate, mate, are you touching on the fact of where they took away the need for the child to have a meaningful relationship with both parents? Is that the amendment?
Yeah, so that is correct. I think we also talked on this previously. So there
Yeah.
is a conflation between shared parental responsibility and shared care. Now, we've never had the latter. What we've had is a presumption that both mum and dad, after separation, have equal rights to make key decisions about the kids in relation to religion, education, and health, and other things. That at least made a presumption that mum and dad were starting on the same level. Independence of care and how that was divided was a significant change to our legislative environment. And as I said in the previous interviews, most of the Western world looked to Australia with envy that we had achieved that, even though it had significant shortcomings because it wasn't relevant to care and it was a rebuttable presumption. And the first thing that women attacked was that rebuttable presumption. And it was rebuttable on the basis of there being domestic violence. So it underpinned an enormous increase in false allegations or weaponized allegations of domestic violence. But it was conceptually and philosophically an important part of our legislative environment. And Labor, out of the blue, got rid of it.
Yeah, well, from my experience personally, false allegations have increased drastically through the men that reach out to me. Most of them are gobsmacked that it can be believed as fact when there's no evidence to back it up. And then to go that little bit further, we all seem to have the same thought process around it seems to be something that legally the opposition's being encouraged to use. And I mean, when I say the opposition, I mean, seems to be only mothers that are encouraged to use false allegations to dictate custody, but it has become far more prevalent in today's society. And I mean, you look at the male suicide figures, they've gone through the roof. And as the research shows, I think they're heavily underreported, but yet 47 men it's an epidemic level, and they're just not acknowledging the direct harm that it's causing.
Yeah, and once again, I stand by what I previously said on the topic of false allegations. I think the prevalence of false allegations, the fact that the court doesn't in any way, shape, or form adequately address them or work to reduce them, makes the jurisdiction a farce. And that's my impression too. When I said it doesn't operate as a justice jurisdiction, it doesn't operate for multiple reasons, but some of the obvious ones are the fact that it already has preconceptions before the two parties even appear. So that's a bit like a court already deciding that a defendant in front of it might be guilty because of his race or philosophy or religion. We know that that's unacceptable, but the family court does that. If you're a man, if you're a father, you're already behind the matter, and you're fighting just to get ahead. And the second thing is it doesn't action false allegations. It either accepts on their face value, and then men have to desperately try and claw them back or defend them. But as I've seen multiple times, even when allegations are found to be untrue, there's simply no ramifications. And I outlined scenarios on that in the previous chats.
Yeah, well, and just to go a bit further onto that, there is in a different jurisdiction, that would be a clear-cut case of an apprehension of bias.
Yeah, absolutely. And indeed, I'm one of the few practitioners that have taken multiple successful apprehended bias applications on behalf of my clients in the family court. And that is a great topic for another conversation, because what I've seen the judiciary from registrar level right up to the primary tier judicial officers, that's justices that have been sitting in the court for 10 to 20 years, the sort of behaviour I've seen is unfortunately far below the standard that we should be accepting in our judiciary in a jurisdiction that has so much impact. And I wouldn't have been successful in those apprehended bias applications if those members of the judiciary weren't performing their job correctly.
And can I ask, mate, without going too personal into it, is 100% of them applications brought forward under apprehension of bias for fathers?
Yeah, yes, exactly correct. In my case, the ones that I've successfully represented. But the irony is, and as I said, this is a conversation for another potential interview, is whilst those applications were successful, I knew from the industry already that taking such an application is suicide for not only the legal practitioner, but it's also suicide for the father. And that is exactly what I saw. The court basically banded together to ensure that the father's case would not be successful in any way, shape, or form, because he had the gall to take a successful apprehended bias application. So you basically got to kowtow to the jurisdiction and submit to what it does and submit to all the injustices. And well, the words I used 10 years ago was mute supplication. You've got to stand there quietly, respectfully, as you're getting everything in your life that's important to you destroyed around you. And any outbursts, any response, anything proactive will only be used against you. It's ridiculous. That's a
And
ridiculous
there's no
jurisdiction.
stronger definition to the word provocation.
The other way I defined it many years ago is that the family court and the domestic violence systems that work hand in hand, they are violence. They
Yeah.
are violence themselves. The way they are weaponized under false allegations or weaponized by spiteful litigants to hurt the other party is as significant and serious long-term psychological and physical violence as anything you might personally do to another person that you don't like, except arguably even more profound because you can literally take everything from primarily a man that makes life worth living. That's homes, that's children, that's wealth, that's income, that's career, reputation, health, liberty, well-being, and ultimately lives. I think we're losing over 1,000 men a year as a result of the family court and the associated jurisdictions.
Yeah, and then to rub insult into injury, they tell you as they slap you on the way out the door that it's in the child's best interest.
Yeah, we touch on that also, and I think that's just a therapy. I don't think you can do anything but argue successfully that the interest the court only gives a damn about is the mother's. So
Yep.
it interprets the best interest of the child simply as being the best interest of the mother. And we've seen that in so many cases which have turned out tragically, where the court has so heavily leaned in favour of the mother that they've denied very real world risks associated with those decisions. And there have been tragedies. There have been mothers that have hurt children
Yeah.
despite fathers and other persons telling the courts that there is a significant risk. There's no equivalence there because, of course, if there's even the slightest insinuated risk in relation to a father, they'll barely get to see their child and probably only under supervision. Whereas we have mothers who have extensive histories of criminality, violence, substance abuse, mental health issues, who are still getting meaningful and significant, if not primary, access to their kids.
Yeah, no, it's the sad reality of the system. And we touched on it briefly, but in your professional opinion, we've seen ADVOs, the violence orders, false allegations, mental health labels used like tools to erase dads. Why do you think it is that the system specifically seems to target the masculine protectors in regards to, like you said, the ones that have the gall to stand up seem to be the ones that really have their rights completely erased?
Question for a sociologist and not a lawyer. I don't know why our society is doing what it's currently doing. I don't know why this is the worst time in theoretically the history of this planet to be a middle-aged white man like you and I. I'm a bit older than you, but I don't know why we have such a profound anti-father, anti-male, anti-masculine, anti-boy narrative. And it's befuddling to me to answer that. Oh, look, no, actually, I'll attempt to do so. And I'll leverage off something that my friend said a while ago. There is no doubt through distant history, there have been times where women have had a raw deal and have been subjugated in any society across the world. Now, it's still occurring in some developing areas of the world today. But as I respond to that, what women experienced in ancient or distant history and what women are experiencing now in underdeveloped countries is not what Western women are experiencing now. It's nothing like that. There is nothing resembling a patriarchy still existing in our society where we have such profoundly gynocentric public spending, gynocentric laws and policies. At present, it is very, very tough to be a male, to understand what is your role, to have any sort of security, to find a pathway, to know how to interact and relate to women, to manage the risk of relating to women. And that's everything from obviously your marriage dissolving right through to potentially facing problematic allegations in casual relationships. It is a testing and troubling world for men. Now, I don't know, once again, why that's occurring. My friend said it, maybe it's about the pendulum swinging, and he could be right. Women got a raw deal for a long time. The pendulum's now swung to equality, and then far beyond that, I certainly think there's significant evidence to suggest that we've gone well beyond equality. We've gone into the realm of privilege and entitlement and the oppression and subjugation of men, and that maybe the pendulum needs to be this far that one direction in order to finally get to a peak and then to swing back to center. People like me, people like you are trying to bring it back to center. We're not anti-women. We're not pro-men. We're just pro-human rights. And we see that there is a need in our community. At present, that need is boys and men. That seems to be higher than girls and women. We want to see that back to center. And then we're happy to address needs as it arises independent of any other demographic.
Yeah, no, well said, because it's all about mutual respect. And from my lived experience and what I've educated myself upon, I truly believe, like you touched on, we are in the worst time ever to be a white middle-aged man, but it's even worse to be a father. And I'll go one step further to say there seems to be a global push for an anti-family agenda. And the quickest way to destroy the family unit is to remove the protector from it. And most fathers will give anything in there. I say this to dads all the time that contact me, Michael, is what's the one thing that a stranger could come into your life and take from you and make you give everything else you've got to get back? And it's your children. So they seem to have the
Yes.
ultimate leverage from the word go. When a man walks into the family court system, they know that he'll give everything up just to continue to try to remain a part of his child's life.
I'm not inherently a conspiracy theorist. I think there are a lot of conspiracies out there that aren't based in reality or facts, and are an indication of potentially a spectrum of mental health related issues.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's something going on here. And look, if you read the craziest and most radical of the feminist literature, I mean, they have an agenda which is absolutely absurd and incredibly uh, harmful, of marginalizing men both in numbers and roles and safety, to the fringes of society. I'm sure that's never going to occur, but there is an intent to achieve some sort of outcome and objective. And we're having a significant change in Western societies. I mean, Western societies, as well as pretty much every society that's been successful throughout history, was based around the family unit. If
Yes.
we're not successfully protecting, or let's just say if we're not successfully producing and protecting children and helping them grow into effective adults and contributing members of our society, we're doomed to either fail as a society or we're doomed to fail as a species. So, I mean, these are the core tenets of what makes humanity successful. And you can argue whether or not our time is done, whether we deserve to become extinct, as so many animals have, and as we've caused to so many animals. But if you still believe in humans, the future of your children, whatever, you need to analyze, what are we doing with our society? Breaking down the family units, raising children now in single parent households, children that have very few male influences and role models. I mean, there's no men left in teaching anymore. I mean, what is the long-term outcome going to be? Is it going to change the structure of our society? Is it going to cause even more problematic adults? Are they going to be more welfare dependent? How are we going to transcend some of the regional and global crises and challenges that we might face, from potential conflicts to climate change? I mean, how robust is our society going to be? This looks like an experiment that seems to be based on nothing other than a powerful group of people that just don't like men.
Yeah, no, and well said, because I sadly have the same thought process, is that everything does come back to the family unit. If you've got a strong family, you've got a strong society. And there seems to be, I suppose, an inept push to force women to be scared of men and men to be scared of women. And now you've got these children out there that you touched on that they don't know what it's like to be a strong man. And if they do, they're told that they're being toxic masculine. Young boys are too fearful now to want to be a strong, proud man and say it out aloud. They're being medicated if they're acting like just normal, everyday boys. All of a sudden, they're
Yeah.
on the spectrum and they need to be medicated to slow them down. Well, no, there's a different inherent between men and women, and mutual respect states it very well. I mean, men prosper mostly when there's women involved in their life, and it's vice versa. It doesn't work. We're not a frame society where one should be any higher or dictate to the other how life should be.
Yes, exactly right. And look, the thing that's lost on this is it's not just men that are suffering, and it's not just potentially a untested experiment for society, but women are suffering also. I mean, obviously, relationship rates are plummeting, marriage rates are plummeting, birth rates are plummeting, women's mental health is terrible. Women are living in constant states of perpetual fear and angst and anger and rage when it's not really justified, because independent of some of these social constructs, the reality is we still have some of the best lifestyle in all of human history. So, to me, the ultimate purgatory is living in this world, well, living in Australia, in this time, in the time that we're alive, and thinking everything around you is catastrophic, when in all reality, with a bit of gratitude, you actually got everything you need. Now, I obviously deal with a lot of people that have lost everything, but for the majority of people, things are pretty swimmingly good. So we're taking some pretty key things away from women too. We're taking all of the key and most fulfilling biological objectives of life. And I think I touched on this previously too, which is to partner up, to fall in love, to have children, and to be content and secured with your family around you in some degree of financial security. The mantra, the family court, the anti-relationship narrative is taking all these things away from people. No wonder they're struggling. No wonder they're angry. No wonder they've got poor mental health.
No, and another valid point, because it is women now that are being encouraged to. You see these certain women come out on social media and they say they like being a homemaker, they like home duties, and then all these other women will go after them. How dare you? It's your fault we're in the position we're in. And there seems to be a lot of bitterness between a certain select group of these women that, I mean, they're happy to sacrifice 10 men, even if only two of us are guilty. The other eight, they're happy to just say, well, you know what, they potentially might have done something in the future. So it is at the detriment of society, but even worse, it's the children that suffer long term.
This is going to sound close to a crazy conspiracy theory, but it's my observations of the last 10 years, and that is having worked within the family court and associated systems and industries and all the professionals that are in it. There's a lot of people in these industries that really have a personal agenda and philosophy.
Yes.
And look, there's no way to hide it, but that personal philosophy and agenda is they don't like men, okay? Probably because of some maybe legitimate experiences they've had in their lives. They might have never known their father, and all they knew about their father was what their mum told about their father. They might have also resented the fact that their father wasn't around, and resented the fact that their mother was a terrible person and didn't raise them very well anyway. They might have rolled on to have terrible relationship experiences. Look, I mean, I don't undermine anyone's own personal situation. I mean, everybody comes from various positions, and if you come from a position of harm, that'll dictate your attitude. But I don't understand why we've allowed this entire institution to be staffed by and controlled by people who actually don't have particularly fond or acceptable attitudes towards half of the population. It just seems ludicrous. I cannot think of a comparison. It's like setting up an entire government department around social welfare or policy that's staffed by nothing but misogynistic men and thinking that they're going to produce a fair outcome for women. It's just, I mean, and when I said it's not a conspiracy because it's what I've experienced, I've been in the company of professional women throughout the entire hierarchy who immediately take a stance of aggression and anger and dismiss towards someone purely because they're a father advocating for the sake of their family and their children. It's just incredible. And these are a minority of people. They're well connected, they're well funded, they permeate throughout government departments, they have a keen influence on legislation, law reform and policy, and they're having a disproportionate impact on our society and how it functions. So if you are a disenfranchised man or woman, chances are in some way, shape or form, these people that are connected, influential, are playing a role in relation to what you're experiencing. Society shouldn't be operating like this. We shouldn't be dictated to by a very influential and angry minority, and that angry minority shouldn't be impacting our lives and the structure of our society.
Yeah, and again, you're on point, because it's inept in every human nature that your life bias is going to affect the way you see the world around you. So if you've come through, hurt people, don't they? So yeah, you're right. When they find themselves in a position of power, whatever they've experienced in life, it's almost like, righto, now it's my turn. I've personally experienced this from a so-called ICL where she was aggressive. She said things to me that no professional person should say to anybody, but let alone somebody that's supposed to be in a position to mediate the best interests of your children. She went way beyond that. She stood over me. She used intimidation and fear. And if you transpose the genders and a man done that to a woman, he would be charged. There'd be no doubt about it. He'd be charged for what he done.
So I'm an ex-public servant of some 16, 17 years, as well as my private side of my career. When I was a public servant, I felt that I had an obligation, and one of the key obligations was to administer public money in the most ethical manner possible and to account for it down to a single dollar spend, as well as basically provide the best service I could to the public and manage my staff in the best way to achieve those outcomes. There are huge institutions of the family law and associated elements of that, including the domestic violence industry and all the professionals and all the employees associated with that, who are falling far short of anything resembling that sort of standard. And that's everything from family court registry staff treating men like crap, through to expert report writers already having made up their mind before they've even put pen to paper and interviewed someone, through court staff that are dismissive to male self-represented litigators, through, as you said, ICLs, and legal aid lawyers who are some of the most unprofessional and inept people that I've ever met in the legal industry. I don't understand how these people can prevail. I don't understand how they can continue to operate at such levels with such lack of professionalism. I don't know how they operate morally or ethically within themselves. They obviously justify it in some way, shape, or form. But one of the key things is there's not enough accountability and there's not enough avenues for legitimate, valid complaint. And I know because, once again, on behalf of my clients over 10 years, I've made lots of complaints in relation to many different people in many different contexts, from complaining about the performance of professional psychologists to complaining about lawyers. And many of my complaints were successful, but the processes are difficult, expensive, and many of those processes are being watered down. And like I said, I've taken apprehended bias recusal applications against judges and I've had them booted off the matters. But it's not making things any different. These men still get screwed. Doesn't matter about the complaints. I've recovered money for them against lawyers, but these issues are still continuing. Look, two examples come to the top of my mind. Nothing as dramatic as that. That is what I've seen so often, Daniel. But the thing is, these practitioners also lie. They lie in their own name. They lie in relation to their own opinion and their own circumstances. One example, not particularly significant, but I remembered prior to a hearing being convened, the lawyer for the mother connected to the court briefly by video call. We were able to see that she's sitting in her car in casual clothing. So she clearly wasn't prepared for the hearing. She wasn't in an appropriate location, like a meeting room or conference room. She wasn't wearing a professional outfit. She immediately cancelled her camera. And then when the courts connected officially at the normal time to convene, she said flatly to the court, "I'm sorry, Your Honour, I can't turn my camera on because I've got technical problems." Now, everybody in that court, other than the judge, had just seen her in her car wearing casual clothing because she couldn't be bothered being in the right place at the right time to attend this hearing in the right manner. And then she just only minutes later goes on to lie flatly to the judge that she was having technical problems, which was bollocks. And then, look, another example would be a particular notorious registrar who, befuddling to me now, has actually progressed through the hierarchy, who was probably the most unprofessional member of the judiciary I've seen in my career. I can tell you countless anecdotes of his behaviour, but the key takeaway in relation to this individual was because of his professionalism in dealing with anybody, and that's lawyers on both sides in the court and everybody before the court. I used to just think this person couldn't get a job anywhere. In the 2020s, there's no way that you'd be allowed to relate and communicate with people in such offensive, angry, derogatory, and abusive manner in a position of authority without suffering serious consequences or the end of your career. But here was a registrar that was doing this as a matter of course and progressing up into the judiciary a couple of years ago, which, as I said, to this day bewilders me. One of the key things and one of the key themes in the documents that we've prepared for many years now is the fact that you should not have parenting matters in an adversarial system. So all the people that we've talked about, these corrupt lawyers, these ICLs, these report writers, these dodgy members of the judiciary, this is a wrong forum for deciding parenting matters. It shouldn't be a contest. It shouldn't be a binary win-lose. It shouldn't be one side and their lawyer fighting to the death and being prepared to use every underhanded tactic to get an outcome. It should be a very different forum and environment. Now, I say that with reservations because even the non-adversarial system that we proposed to set up, if it was completely stacked and staffed with nothing but misandrists, it wouldn't be any better. But the first thing we need to do is we need to get child matters out of a legal system where there are significant key stakeholders who are incentivized by making tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars out of keeping the matter at loggerheads. We need a different system.
Yeah, no, and look, I say this all the time on social media, and it's probably a bit more blunt than what, a professional like yourself would say, but I truly believe through my lived experience that the family court's been designed to destroy families, destabilize parents, predominantly fathers, and traumatize children to maximize profits. And when you have so much money dangling at the end of the rainbow, so to speak, there is any wonder that they're not making amendments to make it better. They're making it harder for men and women in some situations to stay a part of the family unit.
Yeah, look, I think the key stakeholders, when you look at the Australian Law Reform Commission recommendations, which I think came out just before the Senate inquiry recommendations, which we strongly stated should not have been put into place because that was a stakeholder inquiry. That was the Australian Law Reform Commission is chock full of lawyers. But ultimately, of course, the Senate inquiry recommendations, which was the very first inquiry that heard from thousands of members of the public in relation to how this court had hurt them and their families. So it was a legitimate, sincere inquiry in relation to people that have been impacted by this court, not just people that were stakeholders. Well, the Labor government ignored everything from the Senate inquiry. It ignored the voices of the people that had gone through this system. And by, for instance, getting rid of the shared parental responsibility presumption, they enacted the Australian Law Reform Commission's recommendations. And as I stated, gutted 25 years of case law, guaranteeing the lawyers are going to make hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars for many years to come. So, yeah, these people shouldn't be making the decisions as to the future of the jurisdiction. Arguably, the judiciary, I mean, I don't envy them. I never have over the years, and I've written about the vicarious trauma that they might suffer. You think they might be on big salaries, and perhaps subjectively they are, but I don't even think it's potentially enough money for what they must experience. Some of them end up like that registrar I talked about, and I will make this comment about that registrar in closing. I likened him to the Emperor out of Star Wars. He was wizened and deformed by his own evilness and the power of the dark side. He was an extraordinary character, but that is a manifestation of trauma. I think the only way he could cope with the decisions he had to make and the impact they have was to somehow, internalize it. We've seen, obviously, that these judicial members must know how many litigants before their courts have died over the years. They must know that, there's been 75 suicides of litigants in my matters in the last 15 years. They must know that there's been 17 family tragedies where one of the parents has harmed the others and the children. They must know the stats on what happens before them. Look at the poor family court judge in Brisbane who took his life. I mean, so I do show and I do legitimately express sincere sympathy for the vicarious trauma that judges go through. But on the backside of that, they're implementing policy, not law, not ethics, not morality. They're implementing a very, very harmful policy that is causing untold grief. And I know that even if I was given the opportunity to act in one of those roles, I could not do it. I couldn't implement that policy. I couldn't attend continuing legal education seminars where I'm told the false narrative that domestic violence is gendered. It's a gendered crime. It's all about equality and lack of respect. I know those three things are bollocks. I couldn't take that into my workplace. I couldn't accept that in my workplace. I couldn't apply that mantra when I know it's objectively not correct.
Yeah. No, well said, mate. And look, I could keep talking to you all afternoon, but I know you're a busy man. And again, I just want to appreciate and thank you for the time and the knowledge. And even more important than that, mate, it's the testicular fortitude you have to speak from the profession that you come from. Again, mate, I can't take the time enough to thank you because your insight does help people get an understanding and comprehend the reality of what goes on in the family law system. And if we even get through to one person that decides that, okay, what they're saying is my lived experience, I don't need to end my existence. I've got to say this to a lot of alienated fathers. Yes, they do strip us of everything, but they can't ever take the title of dad. And that's what I hold on to deeply. I hold on to that with both hands because I will always be dad, even though I don't currently see my children. At some point, I hope they'll come back. But at the same token, if they don't, my purpose now is to make sure that less men, less families are broken by a system that, in my opinion, is deliberately designed to target us. So, again, mate, I can't thank you enough for your time, and I do look forward to the next conversation we have, Michael.
Thanks, Daniel. Anytime. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, mate.